Imagine finding a tub of butter that's older than Jesus. Not a fossil, not a sculpture, butter. In the peat bogs of Ireland, archaeologists have recovered enormous chunks of ancient butter. Some date back more than 3,500 years. One specimen weighed almost 30 pounds and had been sitting underground for more than 2,000 years, which raises a fascinating question. Human beings valued butter enough to make it, store it, bury it, trade it, fight over it, tax it, and at one point even pay for permission to eat it. Then, somewhere in the 20th century, the story changed. Butter went from treasured food to nutritional villain. We were told to put down the butter and pick up margarine. Then, some of those margarines turned out to contain industrial trans fats that were eventually removed from the food supply. So what happened? Was butter unfairly convicted? Or did the nutrition world have good reason to be concerned? Today we're putting one of my favorite foods under the microscope. And I have to dedicate this episode to my friend Bella from Steak and Butter Gal. Bella, with a name like Steak and Butter Gal, there was simply no way I was making this episode without acknowledging how you've helped to normalize the importance of adding butter to our diet. And full disclosure, I love butter too. So yes, butter has hired a very sympathetic attorney today, but the evidence still gets to testify. This is episode 4 of Food Under the Microscope, where we don't worship foods and we don't demonize them. We investigate them, their history, their chemistry, their physiology, and what the evidence actually says. And if you enjoy this series, hit the like button. And if YouTube gives you the option, hype this video. That tells YouTube you want more food under the microscope and helps us get nuanced nutrition conversations in front of more people. Now let's go back several thousand years, because butter's story begins long before refrigerators, grocery stores, or cardiology guidelines. Once humans began raising milk-producing animals, they faced a problem. Milk is nutritious, but it spoils, transforming milk into yogurt, cheese, ghee, and butter gave humans ways to concentrate and preserve some of that nutrition. And butter became valuable, maybe valuable enough to bury. Researchers studying Irish bog butter have confirmed a tradition stretching from around 1700 BC into the 17th century. And archaeologists have cataloged hundreds of examples. Why put butter in a bog? The bog is cool, acidic, and low in oxygen, conditions that can preserve organic material. But preservation may not explain every deposit. Some butter may have been stored. Some may have been hidden because it was valuable. Some may even have had ritual significance. For thousands of years before the refrigerator, somebody looked at a peat bog and thought, that'll work. But Europe wasn't the only place butter mattered. Across South Asia, clarified butter, ghee, became deeply embedded in cooking, medicine, and religious traditions. In Tibet and Himalayan cultures, butter became part of the butter tea. Traditionally, tea, salt, and yak butter, providing concentrated energy in a cold, high-altitude environment. And in medieval Europe, butter even became tangled up with religion. Rouen Cathedral in France has a tower known as the Butter Tower, traditionally associated with contributions connected to permission to consume butter during Lenten restrictions. Think about that. People were willing to pay for the privilege of eating butter. Today, we pay extra for grass-fed butter. Apparently, the business model has been working for centuries. But what exactly is butter? This is where breakfast becomes a physics lesson. Cream contains tiny globules of milk fat dispersed through a watery phase. Start churning it and those globules repeatedly collide. Their protective membranes become disrupted. The fat begins joining together. Eventually, something remarkable happens. The structure flips. Cream is primarily fat dispersed in water. Butter becomes water dispersed within a continuous fat phase. It's called phase inversion. Your grandmother wasn't just churning cream. She was doing food chemistry. Or put another way, butter is what happens when you annoy cream long enough that it changes careers. And American butter isn't actually 100% fat. By federal definition, it must contain at least 80% milk fat. The rest is largely water with small amounts of milk solids. That's one reason butter behaves differently from clarified butter or ghee. Heat butter and the water leaves while the milk solids can brown and eventually burn. Remove most of that water and those solids and you get clarified butter. Continue developing those nutty flavors before separating the solids, and you're moving into ghee territory. And why is some butter almost white while other butter is deep yellow? Part of the answer is the cow. Carotenoids from what the animal eats can influence the color of milk fat. Pasture, season, breed, and feeding practices can all matter. In other words, you aren't only what you eat. Sometimes you're what you ate. Now let's put butter under the biochemical microscope. Most people hear two words, saturated fat. And yes, butter contains plenty of it. But dairy fat is much more complicated than the label suggests. It contains many different fatty acids, including short chain, medium chain, long chain, monounsaturated, odd chain, and branched chain fatty acids. One of the most famous is butyrate. In fact, the name butyrate comes from the Latin root associated with butter. But let me stop an internet myth before it starts. Yes, butter contains butyrate. No, eating butter is not physiologically identical to feeding the bacteria in your colon that produce butyrate from fermentation. Different processes. Butter also provides fat-soluble nutrients, particularly vitamin A. You'll hear claims about vitamin K2 in grass-fed butter as well. There may be nutritional differences based on how the animal was raised. But let's not turn butter into a multivitamin wearing a cape. The bigger lesson is this: butter is not one molecule. Researchers are still investigating some of the dairy's fat's lesser-known components, including odd-chain and branched-chain fatty acids. We spent decades arguing about butter, as if an entire food could be summarized by one line on the nutrition facts label. Then came the heart disease era. As cardiovascular disease became a major public health concern, researchers increasingly focused on dietary saturated fat, blood cholesterol, and atherosclerosis. Butter became an obvious target. And this is where I don't want to replace one oversimplification with another. Butter can raise LDL cholesterol, for those of you who focus on that. Controlled trials demonstrate that. So I'm not going to tell you saturated fat doesn't matter simply because I like butter. But does the fact that butter can raise LDL automatically tell us the entire health effect of eating butter? Not necessarily. A large systemic review and meta-analysis involving more than 600,000 participants found butter consumption was not significantly associated with cardiovascular disease, coronary artery disease, or stroke. There was a tiny association with overall mortality and an inverse associated with type 2 diabetes, but those data were observational. So don't hear butter prevents diabetes. That's not what the study proved. The reasonable conclusion is that the outcome data for butter itself were far less dramatic than its reputation might suggest. And here's another fascinating wrinkle. The food matrix matters. Researchers have compared dietary fat delivered as butter with dairy fat delivered in cheese. Even with similar amounts of saturated fat, cheese has sometimes produced a smaller increase in LDL than butter. Same broad source of fat, different food structure. Why? Possibilities include calcium, protein, fermentation, digestion, and the physical structure surrounding the fat. That's why one of my favorite principles in nutrition is your body doesn't eat nutrients. Your body eats food, which is why every situation should be looked at differently. Now that brings us to butter's great rival, margarine. Margarine was developed in 19th century France as an inexpensive butter substitute. And eventually, butter and margarine went to war. Not metaphorically. Governments got involved. Wisconsin eventually prohibited yellow margarine. But why yellow? Because if margarine looked like butter, dairy producers worried consumers would be fooled or simply choose the cheaper competitor. So white margarine could be sold with yellow coloring that consumers mixed in themselves. Imagine coming home from the grocery store and having to finish manufacturing your margarine. Wisconsin remained the last state prohibiting yellow margarine until 1967. This wasn't breakfast. This was organized spread crime. But the bigger plot twist came later. As saturated animal fats were discouraged, Some margarines and shortenings used partially hydrogenated vegetable oils. Those became a major source of industrial trans fats. Eventually, the evidence became strong enough that the FDA determined partially hydrogenated oils were no longer generally recognized as safe and moved them out of the food supply. Important distinction. Modern margarine is not automatically the trans fat heavy margarines of decades ago. Formulations have changed. But the lesson is bigger than butter versus margarine. Nutrition history should make us humble. And sometimes the food we replace matters just as much as the food we remove. So should we replace butter with extra virgin olive oil? That's one experiment. Replace butter with refined carbohydrates. That's another. Replace it with an industrial trans fat containing spread. History taught us that's another experiment entirely. And that brings us to the low-carb world. Why do keto and carnivore communities love butter? Well, it's delicious. It has essentially no meaningful carbohydrate. It adds energy and palatability to meat, eggs, seafood, and vegetables. And when butter is part of replacing a carbohydrate-heavy meal with protein and fat, the glucose and insulin response can look dramatically different. But here's where I may get myself kicked out of the butter fan club. You don't need to put butter on everything simply because you're keto. If you're trying to lose body fat, remember, your body already brought some butter to the party. Dietary fat can be wonderful for cooking, enjoyment, satiety, and getting enough energy. But ketosis doesn't require drinking sticks of butter. And if you're eating a high saturated fat diet and your LDL-C or ApoB rises dramatically, don't ignore it because someone online told you everybody on keto should have high cholesterol. Look at the whole patient. Blood pressure, glucose and insulin resistance, triglycerides and HDL, ApoB, lipoprotein small particle A, LDL particle sizes, smoking, family history, inflammation, body composition, and when appropriate, evidence of actual plaque burden. That's personalized medicine. So after thousands of years, what's the verdict on butter? Butter isn't a miracle food, but it isn't nutritional napalm either. It's an ancient dairy food with fascinating chemistry, a remarkable history, and effects that depend partly on dose, replacement food, individual biology, and the rest of the diet. For many people, butter can fit beautifully into a nutrient-dense, low-carbohydrate or carnivore diet. For someone who experiences very large increases in atherogenic lipoproteins, it may make sense to adjust the amount or types of fat and follow the biomarkers. Don't fear butter blindly, and don't worship it blindly. Understand it, because thousands of years ago, people buried butter in bogs. Centuries later, people paid for permission to eat it. Governments fought over what color its competitor was allowed to be. Then nutrition guidelines taught an entire generation to fear it. And today, some people put it in their coffee. Human beings apparently cannot just eat butter. We have to make it dramatic. And maybe that's exactly why butter belongs under the microscope.